It doesn't matter if you're looking at Karachi or Lahore or Los Angeles or Mexico, it's always transportation. How come other cities who have even more cars than we do, they do not see those kind of pollution levels?
So cooking happening, heating happening, any cold part of this country. Skardu, for example, has 300 AQI because they burn biomass to heat themselves.
And you cannot go after 1.6 million vehicles in Lahore when in reality the number is at least 1.5 times higher than that. That 1% of vehicles are responsible for 40% of the emissions from the transportation sector.
So our idea that you can have CNG rickshaws replacing the existing rickshaw fleet and expect magical reductions in emissions is not happening. Hello and welcome to this installment of Front Seat to Climate Change. We've been having some conversations, particularly under Dawn's Breathe Pakistan initiative. And with us today is actually a colleague of mine, and I work with him, Abid Omar, who is the founder of Pakistan Air Quality Initiative, and we work very closely on a lot of air quality evidence building initiatives. As part of it, I think this conversation would be less like an interview and more like a conversation where we actually talk about the air pollution issues in Pakistan. So thank you for being here, Abid, and I'm happy being in Karachi, not being in Lahore as well. But I think let's jump into the discussion. We have seen our data. We've seen the data for the last 10 years now at this point. And we know the sources. And the recent material that we have says that it's brick kilns, industries, transport, with transport being the biggest one.
The sources are, of course, always the same. You know, it doesn't matter if you're looking at Karachi or Lahore or Los Angeles or Mexico. It's always transportation as the number one contributor anywhere in the world. But of course, you know, the question that I always think about is that how come other cities who have even more cars than we do, they do not see those kind of pollution levels?
And also this idea, whenever you talk to someone in Lahore, especially someone who does not know about air pollution, their number one thought is Karachi is a bigger city, it has more cars. Why is it polluted there? And similar thoughts, you know, about other smaller cities where there are fewer cars, even fewer than Lahore, like Multan, for example, and it's getting worse and worse. So transport, meteorology, your weather impacts, inversion, we know the picture is quite complex, but I think let's stick to transport as an example. There are a couple of reports out there. We've seen reports since 2009 that transport, diesel emissions, two-stroke engines, they are causing. And we're still quite in the black hole about this. What is the actual emissions? We do the emissions inventory work. Government has done it. And it says that, okay, 30% PM2.5 emissions, 80% cumulative emissions from, if you just consider a few sectors. But no one actually knows that when a bike or a car or a truck is on the road, what are the sort of emissions on a road, such as Shar FSL? You don't know what the emissions are of the vehicles passing through it.
Before that, let's take a step back. So yes, there are studies. I mean, there's one study by the Urban Unit which says 83% is transportation. Another study by the FAO which says 60%. And you know, so it's roughly we know that it's a big issue. But these studies are just desk level research where you look at what the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics is saying. It says there are so many cars, so many brick kilns, so many industries, and we know what the type of car is. Is it a motorcycle or a bus or a four-wheeler? We know the brick kilns, if they're zigzag or the older technology. With the industries, we also have an idea. Is it like a cement plant or a power plant or a steel re-rolling mill or a textile industry? So this is all just based on survey existing statistics which are available. And so and you know, there's a problem with the state of these statistics in Pakistan. Both of us have looked at these numbers in detail, and we also are sometimes left scratching our heads that does this number make any sense? But let's say we take it at face value. And these results are being presented by various organizations, right? So, but at the end of the day, we also know that perhaps 50% of the economy is in the undocumented sector. That will not be in any of the statistics. We also know that the fuel quality is very bad, whether you're talking about diesel or petrol or the fact that they're burning trash, rubber tires, plastic waste, to power industries, to power brick kilns, to power steel mills, to power boilers for the textile industry. So none of these facts are going to be captured in any of these existing methodologies that are available.
So I think there's this very interesting anecdote about this, that I think on the western side of Margla Hills, when you enter the KP region, there are a lot of quarrying being done, mines and quarrying being, and it obviously to a person it visibly releases particulate PM10, but also PM2.5, and there were complaints to the Supreme Court that this is causing pollution for the residents. And without monitoring, they decided to shut down those quarries as well. And eventually, it was decided that someone needs to go conduct an EIA, conduct an environmental study, present the data in the court. And when the quarrying activities were happening, the emissions levels were lower when they were not happening at night. And eventually, they realized that at night time, when particulate levels are picking up, it's the biomass burning that's happening in the hills to keep yourselves warm that's actually causing the high PM2.5 levels. They stay there throughout the night, and in the morning it's really polluted.
So in fact, a friend who lives in Islamabad was saying that just behind their sector is an undocumented sector where they're using wood for burning, and he sent me these pictures, and it just during breakfast hours and during dinner hours, you just see a cloud of white smoke coming out of there.
So cooking happening, heating happening, any cold part of this country. Skardu, for example, has 300 AQI because they burn biomass to heat themselves.
And you don't need to do huge environmental assessments and surveys and go on the ground. Nowadays, you have technologies which are these low-cost monitors which you can just deploy, and you immediately can know what the problem is. But I want to bring the conversation back to what you were talking about. The biggest problem in Pakistan and in any other place is transportation.
And the data around it.
But the reason why we are so concerned here and not about transportation in Los Angeles or Beijing is because their pollution levels do not reach 1,000 AQI or up to even 2,500 AQI we have seen earlier this month. So we need to find a way to address this one specific sector as the primary polluter. Whether it's 40% or 80%, we don't know for certain. But to go after this with our scarce resources, right? One way of doing it is that you take every single car in Lahore and you take it to the VIC station, the Vehicle Inspection and Certification System, and there are 20 or 30 such sites all across Punjab, which currently are testing only public transport vehicles such as rickshaws, buses, and nothing else. You can send the cars. How many cars are there in the Lahore district?
I think about 1.6 million cars and 5 million bikes.
So if you have 1.6 million cars, that sounds like a task which will take a couple of years to get every single car to go in there. And that's only the registrations in the Lahore district. And we know that in Punjab, you have a lot of cross-district movement, as well as cross-boundary movement, where especially from vehicles registered in KPK, transportation and commercial vehicles like these big trucks which take containers registered in Balochistan. So you're not even capturing those. So how do you understand exactly what the high polluters are before you can go after them? Because you cannot go after 1.6 million vehicles in Lahore when in reality the number is at least 1.5 times higher than that. So there, I think that, don't you think that's the thing to do, is try to figure out?
So that's the issue, right? We actually, not just the vehicles, the number is we have our registrations, excise registrations for Lahore district. So the new vehicles coming on the road, as you mentioned, trucks from any other province will not be considered as part of that sample. And also we don't have disaggregated data of how much fuel or the type of fuel that does get used in not just Lahore district, but Lahore division, and what is the quality of that fuel. So there are no published government reports on the quality of fuel available in Punjab or district level. So that's where your conversation, you're in a data black hole.
So
and
it's
you have to
a
figure that
problem
out.
of not being able to. I mean, the normal way is, yes, exactly. You have so many cars. It's a four-wheel drive. It has a 1300 cc ka engine or 1600 cc, and it uses this fuel of this quality, and it's Euro 2 or 4 or 6, and it gives so many emissions. But there are ways today to leapfrog all of these problems.
Yeah.
Right? Like today, we are no longer in the world of landlines. We're in the world of 3G and 5G. So, what is the leapfrog technology to be able to solve the problem in a way overnight, right? And that is something that we, the Pakistan Air Quality Initiative, are proposing, that there exists a methodology called remote sensing. These are these little boxes, you can imagine, they're only like this big. You put it on the side of a road, and every single car that is passing by, you will know exactly what the emissions are. And you combine this data with the vehicle registration data, where you know the make, model, engine capacity, fuel type, everything is existing as part of the vehicle's registration book. And you will build your picture of, and again, why to do it? You want to identify who the high emitters are. Let's assume that hypothetically a brand new car is not the high emitter. So why do you need to send every car to this big station where you can be like, okay, these are the low emitters, let's not send them. Generally, it is known that it is the big commercial vehicles which are used the most, whether it's a bus or a truck or a Mazda or Chevrolet. They're driven all day. They're driven long distances. They carry heavy loads, and they lack proper maintenance. So once you identify, okay, this is the 1% or 2% of these 1.6 million vehicles, then you can much rapidly start addressing this. In fact, there's the case study from Delhi in India, where they did something like this as a pilot project. And they identified that 1% of vehicles are responsible for 40% of the emissions from the transportation sector. So pretty much you're able to bring your emissions down in the context of Pakistan by 20 to 40% overnight by just going after about 160,000 vehicles, or even less, of 1%
and
of
the
the
same. I think the same study in India, in Delhi, it pointed out that our thought process about certain fuels being cleaner, such as gasoline being cleaner than diesel or CNG being cleaner than gasoline, is not what's in line with real world emissions. So our idea that you can have CNG rickshaws replacing the existing rickshaw fleet and expect magical reductions in emissions is not happening. Similarly, you replacing Euro 2 with Euro 5 might not lead to that result, unless you also have a diesel particulate filter, unless you also have the emission standards for the engine. So we know that the policy fixes might not translate to the exact theoretical outcomes. That's why you also need the real world data.
So the theoretical outcome is, okay, if it's a petrol rickshaw, go to CNG. But the real world testing shows that when you take this rickshaw with a CNG engine and you put it on a dynamometer and you do a certain simulated test, you get emissions which are totally different. You also know the Dieselgate scandal that happened with Volkswagen, where they were tampering with the emissions. But even then, these simulated tests simply do not tell you the correct picture. So, and that's again a disadvantage of the VIX system, that you're not able to catch the right results. So imagine you go through the traditional way of vehicle emissions testing and you say, okay, this is the easiest and cheapest solution, but it turns out that that solution is a non-solution. Because rather than that reducing 20% of the emissions, it reduces 0.1%, as is the case with transitioning from petrol to CNG. Because in the real world, CNG is giving out different types of pollutants, which is not PM 2.5, but it's everything else.
It might be leading to the new particulate formation that we have not studied in Pakistan yet. So I think then transport, we know that this is something that needs to be done. We're trying to do it as well. And the responsiveness of policy making around it would be really important to look at. That we have, if hypothetically we have a, starting from this point till the end of next year, we have some data set. and that translates into a good policy, we might see actual work being done.
So policy is the most important part in the solution to air pollution. These technological solutions we speak about, or people who talk about individual actions like planting trees and things, but at the end of the day, it is our policymakers that have to come together and say that these are the right things to do, and figure out how to do them. Because today, legally, you cannot measure the emissions of private vehicles. You can only do that for public vehicles. So, even just starting from very basic steps like that. So how does that even begin? And that's my message to policymakers. Let's sit down and find a solution for a breathable Pakistan.
I think with that we can conclude. We did speak about it's no longer even an elephant in the building, because we know very clearly it's transport, and how we have probably not managed any policy around transport since the 1960s. It's what we did in the 1960s that's been basically passed down to every government. And hopefully, now that more people are talking about it, this survey where people are pointing out transport as the biggest contributor is, I think, a realization in at least urban centers that this is something that we need to work on, fixing emissions in cars, reducing them, public transport, walkable cities. We know that these 4 steps can potentially bring down smog levels, particulate levels all across Pakistan, particularly the worst affected parts of Lahore, Multan, Faisalabad. So I think that's where we can leave the conversation, and let's hope that in the coming year we do see a shift to the right policies, and hopefully better air in Punjab and rest of the country as well. And with that, we will conclude. Stay tuned for more.